Hello, everybody. Welcome. This is Sarah Haas with the Boss Body Podcast. Thank you so much for being here with us. I'm excited about today's show because my special guest, Lisa Boate, is with us. And Lisa is the founder of Liberated Menopause Consulting and Coaching. And she is bringing up something that I really never took the time to think about or put together. But as a woman in midlife who has, as you all know, recently gone through the menopause change, there's a lot that we're dealing with, not just in our lives, but in our careers. And the way that those two things come together, the menopause and the career, are the kind of this topic that Lisa's going to talk to us about today, because her passion is advocating for creating menopause empowered workplaces. That's a term I'd never heard of, and it just kind of blew my mind when she told me what she does. And I think it's just so amazing. So it's something that I wanted to introduce to you all, because anyone who's going through or has gone through menopause are dealing with these unique challenges. And we're going to talk all about that today. So, Lisa, I'm so happy you're here. Thanks for being here.
Sarah, thanks so much for having me. I really enjoyed when we connected earlier, and thanks for some of your insights in the intro. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Awesome. So I wanted to just start out, if you would just tell us a little bit about your background, because I know you have a background in education and in professional development that has sort of fueled this new endeavor, this new passion. So can you just give us a little bit of history?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's essential to the story because really a big part of why I'm so passionate about this work is that it makes up a big part of my own story. So I was an educator for 20 years. The last decade of my career, I was a coach for other educators and provided professional development. I really loved that work. And the last 5 years of my career, I was specifically supporting kids who speak multiple languages. And so there's a lot of shift and change that needs to happen in the educational structure to really welcome all aspects of kids' identities, right? So that's the work I was doing. And as I was doing that work, I was feeling a lot of resistance from the system itself. And in the last year of my career, I just started having all of these experiences where I just didn't have the resources that I needed to keep doing the job the way I had been doing it. And I didn't know why. I was angry all the time. I like the small things that used to be irritants would like throw me into an absolute rage. Um, and then also physical symptoms started happening. So things like I was having panic attacks at work. My hair started falling out. I was crying in my car, driving home all the time. And just the energy that it took for me to get to walk out the door every day was so significant that, like, by the time I even got to in my last year, I was teaching grade 6 online, which was the most energy expensive thing I've ever done. So I've got that. Plus, it's just so challenging to get myself there in the morning that I realized I was in this place where I couldn't keep doing both things. And by both things, I mean living a healthful lifespan and working the way I was working. Those two things were no longer going to coincide. And so I ended up resigning from my career. And at the same time that that was happening, my kids were at their later teen years. And I know you're in this space too, where suddenly you're facing the empty nest. And all of these questions about identity and who am I now started coming up. And I realized this phase of womanhood and parenting is really underrepresented, and there is not a lot of support. So that is the space I started in, actually, was empty nest. But because I like to take a holistic approach to things, there were always physical elements coming up in the conversations I was having with clients. And as I was listening to them, I was recognizing some of my own symptoms and some of my own story. So I got really curious, as I do, and I took a menopause coaching certification program. And when I did that, it lit a fire in me because there is so much that we do not know in, like, as women, as men, in our society is in general, about what the female body goes through during perimenopause, menopause, and postmenopause. And as through that process, I started recognizing in my own story the reasons why I was experiencing what I was experiencing in the workplace. Now, would I have made a different choice had I known that? Probably not. There were lots of reasons that I ended up resigning. However, knowing that those physical elements are absolutely at play in what women are experiencing at this phase is critical, because there are ways to support. There are better ways of being, but because we don't even know, like, I resigned not even knowing that this was a part of what was happening with me. And that is not a story.
Now, when you say you resigned, do you mean from teaching kids and moving into that professional development space?
No, so that's what was doing professional development as an educator. So it's called being seconded. You get seconded from teaching kids into essentially teaching and working with adults. So it was, yeah, I resigned from my teaching, my education career
To do coaching, and was
to
that
become,
specifically with women in menopause to begin with, or is that something that evolved?
yeah, so it was to become an entrepreneur. And funny, I just had a woman on my podcast and we were having this conversation about the power of naivete, of, making a decision and not even really knowing what's coming, and how powerful that is. Because I think sometimes if you know everything that's coming, maybe you would make a different choice. But naivete is it's that secret sauce that allows you to make a big shift and a big jump. Yeah, so I left to become an entrepreneur and I started working with women who are experiencing empty nest. And because, like I was saying earlier, because I always take a holistic approach to things, their physical symptoms always started coming into the conversation. And it's essential to know what's happening with the physiology of a woman at this phase. And so that's when I shifted into menopause coaching and consulting.
And at the
Well,
same time, you were going through these same physical symptoms. So not
yes,
only are they talking about what they need help with, it's mirroring back to you like, oh, hey, this is happening for me too. So
exactly.
that's a light bulb moment.
Yeah, it really was. And then in October, so I'm in Canada, just north of Toronto, there was a report that came out from the Menopause Foundation of Canada. And I have since found research that is very similar in the United States, only obviously scale is larger in the US, right? So we're like, so in Canada, the report around menopause at work in Canada indicated that the little Canadian economy was losing 3.8 billion, $3.5 billion a year due to unsupported menopause symptoms. And the one that really hit me, that I realized was so deeply connected to my own story, is that 1 in 10 women are leaving the workforce at the peak of their skill, wisdom, knowledge, institutional understanding of how everything functions because of unsupported menopause symptoms. But most of us don't know that that's what it is, right? We just are having those experiences of, I'm exhausted. I can't, something I hear a lot is, I can't multitask the way I used to. I can't recall words in the way that I want to. So if I'm in the middle of a presentation and suddenly I can't find the words that I need, it's humiliating. Terrible headaches. So there are all these really, increase in anxiety, the rage that I was talking about, all of those things women are experiencing, not knowing that it's actually not just the way things are now. It's perimenopause or menopause that is going completely unknown and unsupported. And when we look at the leadership gap between men and women in senior leadership positions, we can see like we lose women in the childbearing years, we lose women a little bit along the way, and then again at this phase. And it shouldn't be that way.
That's that is kind of mind-blowing, those statistics.
Mm-hmm.
And I never thought of it that way. And I'm sure a lot of people just sort of think of it as, oh, she just decided to retire. She was just getting older and just decided
Mm-hmm.
that it was time. And I can so relate with a lot of those things you were talking about. The word recall. I mean, I cannot tell you how many times I've been thinking, like, oh my gosh, what if I'm getting dementia? Like, I know this person's name. I've known them for so
Mm-hmm.
long, and now for some reason it won't come to my head. And then the hot flashes and
Yes.
headaches that just interrupt your day, and they happen at the worst possible moment. Like you said, when you're
Mhm.
giving a presentation, or when I'm interviewing someone for a podcast, or working with a
Yes.
client, suddenly, that furnace inside just turns on, and it's like I can't think of anything else. And it's exhausting dealing with those symptoms all day. So you're
Absolutely.
trying to do your be 100%, but it's kind of like if you go to work when you're sick, you're obviously, if you're dealing with symptoms, you're not going to be at 100%. And it's so true what you said about, we lose women around childbearing years because it just begins to be too much in a lot of cases to juggle all of that, and to leave your kids every day and then come home and do a whole nother shift. And we're doing the bulk of the childcare and the home organizing and running. So it's impossible to do it all, and sometimes we have to make hard choices at that period in our lives. But I never really thought about it as far as the menopausal years
Mhm.
also leaving the workplace. So
Yeah.
that's such a light bulb moment.
Yeah, it was for me as well. And it really, I said it earlier, it like lit the fire, literally. As you talked about the hot flashes, but it really did because I thought, had I known what was happening to me, and again, I may not have made a different decision, but I would have had more tools available to me to one, understand. Because one of my favorite things about this work is when I start talking about the little known symptoms of perimenopause and menopause, the things that nobody knows about, and I see women's eyes change. And they have this moment of, I, you mean I'm not just losing my mind? Because I think so many of us are sitting in the space of, what is happening to me? Why is everything that I used to do not working the way it used to? Why can't I recall words? Yeah, do I have early forms of dementia? And all of that is energy expensive. All being in that place of unknowing, of wondering what on earth is happening to me, it takes so much energy. And even so, I talk about like menopause, the metaphor I use is being in a body and a life that are under renovation. Because when you live through a renovation, when you're living in that house, how painful that is. It's a really good analogy for this because we are living in a space that is under renovation. And when your body is doing all of that changing, think back to puberty. How tired were you? Right? It's why preteens and teenagers sleep all the time because their body is shifting and changing. And the same thing is now happening for us again, but we don't have the teenage luxury of, and like being a teenager is hard. I'm not trying to suggest otherwise. However, they don't have the same kind of responsibilities and expectations. So we don't have the luxury of being able to sleep and rest in the ways that we did when we were teenagers. We're just expected to plow through it and keep going.
Yeah, and that's so true that women in that phase are at the peak of their career. I like how you said that because I feel that way. I feel like I've finally come into knowing exactly what I want to do, exactly how I want to do it. I've honed my skills. I'm so good at what I do. I've never been better. And I
Mhm.
still feel very vibrant and energetic. I mean, I'm only 52, so I know, there's a whole, 2 decade
Mhm.
span of this perimenopause then to postmenopause, and I'm sort of in the middle of it. But it's such a shame that, well, first of all, that we're not getting credit or acknowledgement that this is going on because everybody knows teenage years are tough and everybody
Mhm.
knows why. Your hormones change, your body changes, it messes with your brain, you're more moody, you don't feel good, you're tired, like you said. But then menopause years, that doesn't really get that acknowledgement. And so we're just supposed to just push right through and just keep doing what we're doing. And what you're saying is some women are just saying, this is too much. It's just not all working. I can't do this anymore. So
Yeah.
you came up with the empowered menopause empowered workplaces. So
Mhm.
what does that mean and what would that look like?
Yeah. So, two things around that. And for employers and organizations, when they're thinking about their workforce, one, going back to what you were saying about being in this space where you are at your most skilled, right? So, it's a significant portion of their workforce that is taking all of those skills that they themselves have invested in, right? The organizations. When I think about myself, walking out the door of my organization, I took with me the education that I had obtained. I took with me 20 years worth of experience in a really wide range of roles. All the provincial connections that I had because I was doing professional development at a provincial level as well. All of the professional development dollars that my organization had poured into me and the institutional knowledge, right? That is something that is incredibly valuable to organizations. And it is employees who have been with an organization for a long time, who have seen from over time how that place operates, what the culture is like. They know the reason why this policy exists now. They hold all of that. And for my last couple of years, I was working in our system from kindergarten to grade 12. So I knew our system from beginning to end and back again. And so I was a very valuable asset, as are most of us who are at this phase. So for organizations to start thinking from that lens of just how valuable we are, that it only makes sense to start making shifts and changes to support us so that we can stay in this organization where you have invested in us anyway.
Yeah, because that is
And
affecting their bottom line when they have to
1%,
bring in a new person starting from
yes,
ground zero or someone who's experienced but has worked at a different organization, and then they have to go through all that training. That is a significant investment on their part.
yes,
And not only that, I wanted to highlight something that you mentioned earlier, that when you see the head executives, the CEOs, the boards of directors, by far the majority are male. And there's a
yes.
woman sprinkled in there here and there.
Mhm.
And when you think about it, the 50, 60 year range is usually once that's when you attain that level. That's when you have finally, worked your way up and gained the
Yeah.
skills and the wisdom and gone for it. And
Yes.
that could be a huge impact on women having 50% of those leadership positions. So what
Yes.
would a menopause empowered workplace look like? What what are you hoping that the organizations, what accommodations could they make or changes could they make?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's a three-pronged approach. So the first level is visioning with corporate leadership so that they understand what is happening with their workforce and why this investment is wise. Professional development and learning for everybody in the organization, because this really is not just a woman or I also like to frame it as like a woman opportunity. This is an opportunity for everyone to really start tuning into their own health and well-being and how they communicate about it. Right. So I have a communication structure that I share with organizations for people to be able to share what they're experiencing, what they need, and what help needs to be actioned in that moment. So, visioning, professional learning, communication strategy, policy development. So, policy is really important because then that foundation is set. It is just there. It's not up to individual women to have to advocate for themselves, because that's what's happening now in some cases. Women are advocating for themselves, or more often what is happening is that women don't even know how to advocate for themselves, and it's not the easiest conversation to have in the world, like you said, particularly with a male power structure, to go in and say, hey, I'm experiencing these things because of menopause and this is the support I need. So for dignity for everybody involved, that policy is really important, and the policy is around health and wellness benefits, things like being able to work from home, some flexibility, environmental control, like just being able to control the temperature in your workspace, right? Like things as simple as that. And then ongoing coaching. So if there are women who are in that organization who want to work with coaches, then that part can be in place as well. So visioning,
I love
professional learning,
that.
policy writing, ongoing coaching and consulting.
Yeah, and I love the coaching part because the conversation is not being had very much.
Yeah.
And we can feel sort of isolated, or we can feel like, oh, I'm the only one dealing with this. And yes, I mean, you joke with your girlfriends about having a hot flash or whatever, but really drilling down to this is how this is affecting me and my career to the point that I might leave the workplace. But that,
Mm-hmm.
that is a very hard subject to broach. Teenagers don't want to talk about puberty.
No.
They don't want to talk about that their body's changing. Everyone can see it, but it's so personal. And
Mm-hmm.
boys and girls go through it. So that's kind of different in that women go through menopause and men don't.
Mm-hmm.
And also, menopause can have a negative connotation. It means you're getting older. It means your hormones have stopped being produced. It means
Mm-hmm.
and it's like we're going to someone and admitting that, hey, I don't have the energy I used to have. Hey, I don't
Yes.
have the memory. I don't have the ability to multitask. And that is something that's really hard to admit. So if women had to do this on an individual basis, it's probably not going to happen. So I like
Right.
that you're trying to put some policies in place and communicate the importance of it. It's like any other corporate wellness issue. When they hire a corporate wellness coach to come in and have everybody start eating healthier, they have less sick leave, they have, lower healthcare costs. It's really kind of the same thing, but just
Yes.
in a different area. So I think your approach to let's take it straight to policy making. Let's get these businesses to understand what's happening and why and what they need to do about it so that we can, working from home is a lifesaver for me. And I
Yes.
know a lot of women who have to commute, and it could even be an hour, hour and a half drive, and come home and still taking care of, I have an 18-year-old and a 21-year-old. There's still a lot of care involved, even when
Mhm.
your children get older, and then
Yeah,
taking
it's
care of
just
your
different.
home. It's a lot. It's a lot, but it's
Yeah.
such an important conversation. And I love the way that you have approached it.
Well, thank you. It's and I also want to say, so I had this like structure come into my brain just one morning, and then I started doing research to see like what else is already out there. And interestingly, the business case for this exists in England. So England is way down the road on this. The majority of organizations and corporations there do have menopause policy. They do have menopause coaches working within organizations. The policy is there and written in those organizations. So there is really good evidence around how effective this can be. And there is a roadmap for what it can look like for us here in North America.
So the proof is already out there. We
It
just
is.
need to take notice and follow suit. I love
Yes.
that. I love
Yeah,
that.
absolutely.
So I understand that you have a guide available to anybody who wants it that can support women in advocating for their menopause needs in the medical space. Will you tell me about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Because that's a whole other piece of this conversation, right? Is that um and it connects really nicely with menopause in the workplace because the way I like to position menopause is as yes, it is uncomfortable. Like I said, at being at home in a body that is under renovation and a life often that is under renovation at the same time. And it also doesn't have to be that way. So, one of the things I was finding is that when women would come to me, they'd be like, well, I went to my doctor and the doctor said that this is just the way it is, right? That this is just the way it is. Like, this is how your life is now. And there is not enough research and education in the medical community about women's bodies, full stop, which we are seeing in all kinds of ways in our world at the moment, and particularly with menopause. Like, if you ask general practitioners how much time they spent learning about menopause in medical school, the answer is like next to none. And it's a really complicated time. But the answer is absolutely not, well, this is just the way it is now. There are preventative pieces that should be in place and lifestyle elements. So there's the core four, which is sleep, stress management, movement, and nutrition. Like those are the four key components that actually the earlier, and that's also why this is not just a conversation for menopausal women. Younger women also need to know this because the earlier they get those pieces in place, the more smooth of a transition they will have through perimenopause and menopause. And then there's the HRT conversation, so hormone replacement therapy, which has all kinds of myth and misinformation built around it that also many of us in the menopause space are working to break down. And again, often those in the medical community are apprised of the research from 20 years ago, but don't know about the issues with that research and the shift that has happened with bioidentical hormones in hormone therapy. So I created a guide for women to take with them when they are going to their medical appointments. So you can go through it before. It walks you through questions you might have, responses you might give. And then the last section is current research around HRT that you can share with reluctant practitioners. And the research is from really good sources. So it's a really well constructed, well researched resource that you can use for yourself, but also share with your medical practitioner.
I love that because bottom line is we need to understand what's going on with our own bodies and minds and spirits in order
Yes.
to effectively advocate for ourselves in the medical field and in the workplace. So I think
Yeah.
that's a great starting point. So if
Yeah.
people want to grab that guide, where can they find you?
So one, I will share the link for it with you to go in the show notes here. And then my website is liberatedmenopause.ca. My email address is there, all my contact information is there. And so that's a really good place to connect with me. And I also can send it to you directly.
Perfect. Thank you, Lisa. I loved this conversation. It's something that it's a talk that needs to be had more, and so I appreciate the fact that you are putting this out there in the world because it is so desperately needed, and I know I, as a menopausal woman, really appreciate it, and those who have been going through this for a while and need resources, need some new things that they can grab onto. I think that's really important. So I want to thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you for making the space to talk about it. That is one of the hurdles, right? Is just getting, because there's often is a problem that people don't even know they have. So the more spaces that that there are to talk about it, the better. So I appreciate your advocacy and allyship.
Absolutely. All right, everyone. That is our show for today. Thank you so much for being here with us. And until next time, I will see you then.